I wonder whether this is a good moment for Graham, your quick fire round.
Very quick fire. We just mentioned some monarchs and just tell us.
If I get it wrong, just cut it out.
One or two things that maybe is not what people think.
Yeah,
of.
just like short phrases if possible.
They'll jump around a little bit, but William the Conqueror.
I mean, William the Conqueror invaded England because he thought he had some divine right to be the King of England. On his coronation day, 25th of December, 1066, due to a misunderstanding over language, when everybody cheered hurrah for the king, he ordered that his soldiers went out and massacred everybody.
Wow. And an overreaction.
Now, you do get that as a sort of footnote in the Ladybird book of William the Conqueror. But again, the notion that this sort of man came over, Harold got an arrow in his eye, and like we all lived happily ever after, belies the fact that he was he was taking power through force, overthrowing the old order, imposing his own language on it.
And massacre people in the north of England, I believe.
And massacre people in the north of England. The Doomsday Book is really about him working out what he's just pinched.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah.
We all go, oh, it's an amazing document there. What's a record life? Yeah, it's just like him totting up what he's stolen off everybody. Yeah.
So Queen Anne.
Queen Anne, I feel a bit sorry for Queen Anne. Queen Anne had all those children and they all died, and she was expected to provide a monarch and was just a sort of quiet lady who didn't really do much and then died and sort of got largely forgotten. You might know more.
No, not really.
Queen Anne is one of those regnant monarchs who just had a lot of children and they all died.
But nothing really she wasn't there for that long, was she? I can't remember.
No, I mean, don't say...
Too sad. Next.
It is sad.
Move on. Charles II.
Charles II, the merry monarch, who comes back in glory and loves cocker spaniels, and who was a sort of... I mean, it's, the trouble with this story is people quite like hedonistic people because they like rock and rollers. So, but, he was the sort of Jim Morrison of monarchy, but without the songs. So he goes around sleeping with anybody he goes near. It is an extremely hedonistic human being who didn't do anything good for this country.
And, of course, as we've already discussed, slaughtered lots of people on his return to the throne.
And slaughtered lots of people on his return to the throne and had bodies dug up and executed. If you read the histories of Charles II, people say opinion is divided. That's another one of my favourites. Opinion is divided.
That's shorthand for scumbag.
Opinion is divided between people who want to prop up the monarchy, who therefore have to excuse appalling people like Charles II, and the people who've actually dug into it is that he was an appalling man.
Yeah.
Or the people who were slaughtered by him.
All the people who were slaughtered by him, yeah.
We don't poll them. But I feel like they'd all swing one way.
But the other thing is we don't know what ordinary people thought of Charles II because none of them wrote anything about him.
And who would have said?
Yeah.
Who would have said at that time, out of fear for being killed? You would have to have some.
And if you
stones.
read, philosophy and other literature and so on during those sorts of ages, you read the sort of backstory, you know that they have one eye to whether they're going to get in trouble. So
yes,
these people will always make room for the monarch if they think that that's good for their life chances or their survival.
Charles II is another one who they say he went among the people and whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know whether there's actual evidence for that. But also, who cares? Well, the rest of us are all walking around the streets.
Yeah.
Why is it magical? Is he Jesus? Is he, coming down to walk among us? Aren't we lucky?
What about King John?
King John, again, is someone you can feel a little bit sorry for, but you're going way back there. And also, he's all of our ancestor, so we have to be careful about Grandad. King John's profligate brother goes out and spends everything on the Crusades. I mean, that is broadly true. He then is obliged to raise taxes for people. and then has his comeuppance. I mean, again, Magna Carta.
Yeah.
Everybody goes, "Oh, that's a marvelous thing, Magna Carta." Really, Magna Carta is just the sort of barons trying to seal their own
which
rights,
John then
and
ripped
power.
up anyway.
Which he ripped up anyway.
They kept on bringing it back and tearing it up.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
You know, so there's not much of it left in force now. But I mean, yeah, it was a very odd.
Interestingly, there was no other John in the family between him and Prince John, who was terrible George V's youngest son. Because they considered that they're also very superstitious, the royal family, and poor young Prince John had a tragic end. He died very prematurely. Yeah.
Although this is why they always predicted that Charles would change his name to George when he became king, but didn't.
Yes.
But I think that's because the age, we've reached an age when people wouldn't really accept that. They just keep calling him Charles.
Yeah.
They probably decided it wasn't worth
George VII
going down that road. Yeah. Talking about George, it's George the Fourth. I think you mentioned him in your book.
I mean, George IV is an appalling person. George IV is an appalling person, even by the, let's return to that phrase, even by the standards of his day.
He was the one who was the regent
Bankrupt.
before he became the king. So.
Yes, he was the regent. Appalling, again, another hedonistic, terrible figure, but who was also very grand. So George IV thought that he was sort of, thought that by dint of being king, all the wars that were being waged under him were his, were down to him, and he was an extremely self-important man who spent huge sums of money which he didn't have and was permanently broke. James I, let's talk about him.
Go for it.
James I, James VI of Scotland, is, again, everybody knows the story of how his mother, Mary Queen of Scots, was executed at Fotheringhay, and how he then, some years later, became King of England, separate to being King of Scotland. James I was an absolute balmy stick, if there is such a word. And it's down to him, really, that the witch hunts of the 17th century happened, because the guy was incredibly paranoid and came to believe that a journey to go and meet his wife, Anne of Denmark, when they were first betrothed, had been cursed by witches in Copenhagen and back in Scotland, and that had whipped up a storm. There was this massive tempest in the North Sea that went on for a year, and which inspired William Shakespeare's Tempest and the opening scenes in Macbeth. And as a result, James became, I mean, if he was a social media influencer, he would be in Ike territory. He believed that there were witches everywhere, and that they needed to be, the conspiracy theorists, that they needed to be exterminated and executed. Yeah. He was responsible pretty much directly for the murder of thousands of women, largely women. And yet, people, lovely James I. Yeah.
Finish on one very quick one, which is my personal bugbear, which is Victoria. Because she is, again, she's elevated to this sort of greatness. And she strikes me as someone who is, like most of them are, deeply self-centered. And as you sort of allude to in your book, went off on this very indulgent, however many years if it was, of mourning. And
wasn't really interested in being queen.
No, but also was, certainly wanted, titles like Empress of India, very much pro empire and all that kind of thing. One of the oddities is kind of the last era. I suppose we sort of talk about the Edwardians, but if we could talk about the Victorian era, we talk about this whole documentaries. What did the Victorians do for us? Which is quite odd because it's a very long period. Yes. It's like connecting the people of the 1950s with the people of the 2010s. But
this is the ladybird territory again. You see, we define our history by monarchs.
Yeah,
that's really unhealthy. How you will ever change that, I don't know. But if you entirely look at the nation's history, the history of England in particular, through the prism of monarchy, they become so entrenched in the fabric of the history and the fabric of our life that you can't ever really quite shift it.
Yeah.